Nobody knew how bad things really were. For years, Bea Arthur wore a mask of smiles on TV, hiding the devastating pain in her personal life. Now, 15 years after her death, a shocking revelation has surfaced. Her final phone call has been made public. And what she said on that call, it's worse than anyone could have imagined. They all lied to me, Bea told her son, just hours before she passed away. Those heartbreaking confessions expose long-hidden truths, her bitter feud with Betty White, the real reason she walked away from the Golden Girls, and the devastating family secret she'd kept locked away for 86 years. Hollywood had no clue. Born Bernice Frankel in Brooklyn on May 13, 1922, to Jewish immigrant parents, Bea's early life was simple but rich with the energy of New York's Jewish community. Her mother came from Austria, and her father hailed from Poland. But as often happens in life, simplicity doesn't last. Everything changed when Bea was just 11. Her family, struggling to make ends meet, packed up and left the bustling streets of New York for a small town in Maryland, Cambridge, to be exact. The South was a completely different world. Segregated, small, and steeped in prejudice. She went from a place where she felt comfortable to one where she didn't quite fit in. In this unfamiliar town, her parents opened a modest women's clothing shop, one of the few Jewish-owned businesses in the area. That shop became their lifeline, a safe space in a town that often felt hostile. That wasn't all Bea had to contend with. By the time she was 12, she had grown nearly 5'10", towering over most of her peers. She had a deep voice and didn't look like the other girls, who were delicate and petite. Teachers would often cast her as the boy in school plays, and classmates didn't quite know what to make of her. She felt out of place, awkward, and isolated. But instead of letting that hold her back, Bea did something remarkable. She found humor. With a sharp wit, she cracked jokes, making people laugh and using humor as both a shield and a weapon. Classmates noticed. Soon enough, she became known as the funniest girl in school. Sharp, dry humor that made Dorothy Zbornak and Maude Findlay household names. It began right there, in a small, segregated town where she was an outsider. She didn't just want to be funny, she wanted more. She dreamed of being a glamorous movie star, like the short, blonde beauties she saw in magazines. There was only one problem. She didn't look the part. But Bea wasn't the type to let that stop her. She threw herself into perfecting a Mae West impression that stunned everyone with its boldness and humor, especially coming from a shy, serious girl. That impression became her signature. It opened doors, even at parties and school events. It was her first real taste of performance, and it was a hit. Decades later, she would still perform that impression, bringing it out during her Hall of Fame induction. After high school, Bea's journey took unexpected turns. She dabbled in finishing school, studied medical tech, and searched for a stable career, but nothing seemed to fit. During World War II, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She joined the Marine Corps Women's Reserve. An era when women weren't exactly lining up to wear combat boots, especially not in the Marines. Bea's decision was groundbreaking. It wasn't planned. She had been working in a food lab and volunteering as an air raid warden. Then, out of nowhere, she heard that the Marines were recruiting women, and, in typical Bea fashion, she jumped at the chance. She didn't just serve. Bea quickly rose through the ranks. After training in the Bronx, she requested to attend motor transport school. Even though she was a New Yorker who probably hadn't driven much in her life, Bea was relentless. Excelled, becoming a skilled dispatcher and driver in North Carolina, known for being blunt, sharp, and maybe just a little too aggressive. One note in her file read that she was over-aggressive and officious, but made up for it with exceptional work, if she was allowed to do things her way. That kind of attitude didn't slow her down. Bea shot up the ranks, becoming a staff sergeant by 1945. Such a rapid rise wasn't a fluke. It was a result of her exceptional ability and relentless drive. After leaving the Marines, Bea tried to settle into a more conventional life. She became a licensed medical lab technician and even spent a summer working at Cambridge Hospital. Surface, it made sense. A steady job, practical skills, and the booming post-war economy. But deep down, something felt off. The lab work was methodical, predictable, and it left Bea yearning for more. It was then that a quiet realization pushed her to take a leap of faith, and by 1947, Bea put down the lab coat and returned to New York to study acting at the New School. That's where everything began to fall into place. She trained under Erwin Piscator, a legendary theater figure, and studied alongside future stars like Harry Belafonte and Walter Matthau. Bea stood out immediately. not just because of her towering height and booming voice, but because she had presence. The director took one look at her and cast her in big, bold roles. Portrayed Lady Macbeth, Lysistrata, and Katharina, each performance larger than life. Even though she initially thought her destiny was in tragedy, comedy crept in, and it would soon be the thing that made her unforgettable. But while her stage career was taking off, her personal life was also evolving. During this time, Bea met Gene Saks. They quickly became a creative and romantic power couple, marrying in 1950. Their bond was deep, not just in love, but in artistry, as they both navigated the world of New York theater. Those early years, they weren't glamorous. Bea took small roles on TV just to make ends meet, appearing on shows hosted by big names like Sid Caesar and Perry Como. It wasn't about the money, though. Those gigs taught her the art of comedy, a craft that would follow her for the rest of her life. Then, in 1954, everything changed. Bea landed the role of Lucy Brown in the Threepenny Opera in Greenwich Village, and the world started to take notice. It ran for 6 years, turning Bea from a background player into a serious star. But the real turning point came during one particular performance of the Barbara song. Something magical happened. Bea poured her heart into the performance, and the audience laughed. At first, she was confused. This wasn't supposed to be funny. But then, the realization hit her. That was the magic of comedy. From that moment on, Bea understood how to blend drama and humor seamlessly. The performance was even recorded by Decca Broadway, preserving that sharp, biting wit that would become her trademark. It wasn't just a hit show. It was the moment Bea Arthur truly arrived on the scene. During this time, Bea had the privilege of working alongside the legendary Lotte Lenya, Kurt Weill's widow, and a Broadway icon in her own right. It was like attending a masterclass in presence and subtlety. Bea was captivated by Lenya's ability to command the stage without ever demanding attention. He absorbed everything. She watched how Lenya could step on stage, stay still, and hold the audience's gaze. That kind of control shaped Bea's own stage presence, and decades later, at 77, Bea would return to the stage to perform Lenya's role. It was a full circle moment she held dear. Bea often said she wished Lenya had written a memoir, as the wisdom shared between them meant everything. But what most people didn't know was that while Bea was becoming a Broadway star, she was secretly leading a double life as a nightclub singer. Between her theater gigs, she performed at the Blue Angel, a small yet prestigious club in Manhattan. It wasn't glamorous by any stretch. The stage was modest, and the spotlight unforgiving. But that's exactly what made it so powerful. Every night at the Blue Angel, Bea learned how to control timing, how to use silence to her advantage, and how to make every word count. She shared the stage with future legends like Barbra Streisand and Charlotte Rae. For Bea, this wasn't just a side hustle. It was a crucial training ground that helped her hone her craft. 1964, after years of perfecting her skills, Bea made her Broadway debut as Yente the matchmaker in Fiddler on the Roof. It was just the beginning of her rise to stardom. But even before the show officially opened, Bea Arthur faced a devastating blow. Rome Robbins, the director of Fiddler on the Roof, pulled her aside and told her something that crushed her spirit. He said her character wasn't central to the story and needed to be cut down. It wasn't personal, just for the good of the show. Still, the sting was real. Arthur, known for her tough exterior, was so shaken by Robin's harsh feedback that she cried during one particularly brutal rehearsal. Years later, she didn't mince words about him. Everybody hated him, she said plainly. Yet, despite the emotional hit, Bea pushed through. Fiddler on the Roof went on to break records, running for thousands of performances and creating a best-selling cast album that stayed on the charts for nearly 4 years. Her role may have been reduced, but it was enough to put her name on the map. Just 2 years later, Bea landed a role that would change everything. In Mame, she played Vera Charles, a sharp-tongued, hard-drinking best friend to Angela Lansbury's iconic title character. Their duet, Bosom Buddies, became the heart of the show. Bea's deep voice and razor-sharp timing lit up the stage. Her performance was flawless, earning her a Tony Award. Off-stage, something even more special was happening. She and Angela Lansbury formed a deep friendship that would last a lifetime. Bea would later reflect on those days with fondness during her one-woman show, remembering the bond they had built. Years later, Bea reprised her role as Vera Charles in the film version of Mame, but this time, things didn't go as planned. Lucille Ball played Mame, and the movie bombed with critics. Still, Bea's portrayal of Vera had already become an essential part of her identity, funny, biting, yet full of heart. In choosing songs for her later shows, Bea made sure to select ones that let her showcase both sides of her performance, her fierce wit and the emotional depth she had perfected in Mame. By the time the 1970s rolled around, Bea Arthur was already a well-known stage actress. But in 1971, something unexpected happened. Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family, asked her to guest star on his new show. Bea's role as Maude Findlay, an outspoken feminist who could go head-to-head with Archie Bunker, stole the spotlight. From guest star to leading lady, Bea became the face of a bold, middle-aged woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Premiered in 1972, and overnight, Bea became a symbol for women who had never seen a character like herself on TV. An intelligent, independent woman, living life on her own terms. But Maude wasn't content with playing it safe. In 1972, the show made a groundbreaking move, tackling the controversial topic of abortion long before the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. The two-part episode, Maude's Dilemma, featured her character, age 47, unexpectedly pregnant and facing a tough choice. The story was raw and complicated. Maude and her husband both didn't want another child, but the decision wasn't simple. The episode didn't offer easy answers, and that's what made it so powerful. It was the first time a primetime TV character had openly addressed such a sensitive issue. Despite CBS fearing backlash, 39 stations even refused to air it. Millions of viewers tuned in, and many wrote to Bea, thanking her for starting such an important conversation. Years later, Bea admitted she wasn't sure she'd make the same choice again, but she never forgot the profound impact the episode had. Even though the show was a smash hit and critics loved her, Bea didn't win a major award until 1977, 5 years after Maude first aired. When she finally won the Emmy for Best Actress, it felt long overdue. Bea had spent years tackling serious issues on screen, from aging and harassment to medical problems and more. She made it normal for women to talk about issues that had previously been off-limits in sitcoms, but true to Bea's nature, she downplayed the honor. For her, it was always about the work, not the trophies. Still, that Emmy was a testament to the change she had sparked, redefining what it meant to be a woman on television. But not every project went smoothly. In 1974, Bea returned to Mame, this time playing the same role of Vera Charles in the film version. However, the movie, with its big budget, flopped hard. Critics panned it, claiming the film had no heart, no memorable music, and no spark. Bea's performance, so strong and captivating on stage, felt awkward and exaggerated on the big screen. One review even joked that Bea looked more like a drag queen than Lucille Ball, who starred in the lead role. Bea later admitted that she regretted doing the Mame film altogether. The experience left her embarrassed, and while Maude soared on TV, the failure of Mame reminded Bea just how quickly things could fall apart in Hollywood. Then, in 1978, she shocked everyone by quitting Maude. The show was still successful, but Bea was done. She said she felt boxed in and needed a change. After 6 seasons of playing Maude, she was ready to take a breath. Her son later shared that she simply wanted time to relax. She had given Maude everything she had, and instead of dragging it on until it faded, Bea chose to leave while it was still at its peak. Same year, her marriage ended as well. It was a turning point, a fresh start. Bea had always done things on her own terms, and leaving Maude was no exception. It wasn't about the ratings or the show's success, it was about integrity. After Maude wrapped in 1978, Bea didn't rush into another hit. Instead, she went through a rough patch. Despite being one of TV's most recognizable stars, Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with her anymore. The landscape was shifting, shows were evolving, tastes were changing, and suddenly Bea's sharp, liberal voice didn't fit with the sillier, more escapist sitcoms taking over TV. She tried a few different projects, guest spots, theater work, and even a new sitcom, but nothing seemed to click. For years, it felt like Bea was just waiting for the next big break. At the same time, her personal life also started to unravel. 1978, the same year Maude ended, Bea's 28-year marriage to Gene Saks came to an end. They had worked together professionally and raised 2 adopted sons, so the split wasn't just emotional, it reverberated through both her personal and professional worlds. Unlike her brief first marriage decades earlier, this relationship had defined much of her adult life. After the divorce, Bea chose to remain single. She embraced her newfound independence, diving into the very self-sufficiency she had once only portrayed on screen. In 1983, when the opportunity came to star in a new show, Amanda's, Bea took it, but the series was a disaster. It was intended to be the American version of the hit British comedy Fawlty Towers, but somehow, the essence of the original got lost in translation, most notably, the entire point of the show. The role didn't feel right, and the character wasn't clear. Even Norman Lear, the mastermind behind Maude, told her bluntly, "You're not playing anything." The show was cancelled after just 10 episodes, and Bea walked away from it disappointed and frustrated. But that same year, a truly bizarre project crossed her path. Bea Arthur in the Star Wars Holiday Special. Yes, you read that correctly. Bea played a bartender in a galaxy far, far away, even singing a number in the Tatooine cantina to close the special. Aired once, was panned by critics, and quickly vanished into pop culture legend. But somehow, Bea's quirky scene became one of the few highlights. Fans later proclaimed she was the only part worth watching, and decades later, her character was even made official in Star Wars canon. While all this chaos unfolded, Bea turned inward. TV had become unpredictable, so she began quietly crafting something of her own, a one-woman show. She wanted to sing again, tell stories her way. With the help of her friend Billy Goldenberg, she started piecing it together, drawing from the moments that had shaped her early career. One song, Pirate Jenny, had stayed with her since the 50s, and she was determined to perform it the way she envisioned it. Arthur didn't want to be Dorothy Zbornak. When the offer came in for the Golden Girls, she turned it down immediately. She had already done her time on Maude, 7 seasons of playing a sharp, loud, and fiercely independent woman. The last thing she wanted was to step into another long-running sitcom, especially when she found out Rue McClanahan and Betty White were already on board. Her first thought, this is just going to be Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens. Same roles, same routines. No thanks. But then Rue McClanahan changed everything. Rue convinced Bea that this time, they'd flip the script. Betty White would play the sweet, naive one, and Rue would take on the role of the man-hungry Southern belle. Bea read the pilot, and it was smart, adult, and absolutely hilarious. After a pause, she called back and said, "All right, I'll get off my ass and do it." That decision led to one of the most iconic casts in TV history. One of the quirkiest behind-the-scenes moments involved Bea's relationship with Estelle Getty, who played her mother, Sophia. In real life, Estelle was actually younger than Bea, but to make her look older, the makeup team spent over an hour each day aging her up with wigs and prosthetics. Originally, Sophia was a secondary character, but once producers saw the electric chemistry between Bea and Estelle on screen, that changed immediately. By 1988, Bea's performance in The Golden Girls was receiving serious recognition. That year, she finally won the Emmy for Best Lead Actress in a Comedy. She'd been nominated twice before for the same role but had lost both times. Now, alongside Betty, Rue, and Estelle, who all went on to win Emmys as well, Bea stood as part of the first ever ensemble in which every main cast member won an Emmy. It wasn't just about popularity. The Golden Girls was respected, and Bea was at the heart of it. Bea had her quirks. One of them was so odd, it became a part of her contract. She refused to wear shoes on set. She hated them, so her team made it official. Bea could go barefoot, as long as she didn't sue the studio if she got hurt. Rue had her own quirk, too. She kept all of Blanche's outfits. For Bea, comfort came first. No shoes, no birds, no gum. She couldn't stand the sound of someone chewing gum. If she caught you with a piece, she'd confront you, no matter who you were. It wasn't diva behavior, just Bea being Bea. Despite her tough on-screen persona, Bea was surprisingly sensitive in real life. Her son described her as quiet, girlish, and vulnerable at home. She was a loner who didn't care much for fame or Hollywood. Most days, Bea wanted just coffee, her newspapers, and peace, keeping a small circle of close friends. She also gave back quietly, like her anonymous $300,000 donation to a shelter for homeless LGBTQ youth. By 1992, Bea had enough of the Golden Girls. It wasn't about money or burnout. The writing had slipped, and the jokes about Dorothy's appearance hit too hard. So, she asked to be written out, leaving the show with Dorothy's happy ending, exactly as Bea wanted. Behind the scenes, Bea's feud with Betty White became legendary. They were polar opposites. Bea valued focus and discipline, while Betty craved warmth. Despite the tension, they created magic on screen. After The Golden Girls, Bea nearly disappeared from the limelight, appearing in just 2 films over 17 years. One was For Better or Worse, 1995, which barely made $40,000. Bea didn't care about fame. For her, it was about the people and the craft. Her last film, Enemies of Laughter, 2000, was similarly low-profile but meaningful to her on a personal level. At 78, Bea Arthur boldly launched her one-woman show, And Then There's Bea, which later hit Broadway as Just Between Friends. The show, filled with humor and music, earned Bea a Tony nomination. In 2005, she brought it back to raise $40,000 for homeless LGBTQ youth through the Ali Forney Center. In 2003, the Golden Girls reunited for a special, where Bea and her co-stars shared memories, while Estelle Getty, struggling with dementia, was absent. The union showcased the strong bond these women had. After her death in 2009, Bea's estate donated $300,000 to the California Center, helping it stay open and leading to the creation of the Bea Arthur Residence for LGBTQ youth. Bea's generosity extended to AIDS services, leaving a lasting legacy. When Bea passed away at 86, Broadway dimmed its lights in tribute. In 2025, after her U.S. Marine Corps service record was deleted, public outcry led to its restoration, ensuring her full story as a Marine, actress, and activist was remembered. She started as a typist and ended up driving trucks in North Carolina, serving as a staff sergeant before she left. Was her record deleted? Turns out, it was removed during a purge of diversity content, but people noticed. Outrage spread across social media, and within days, the page was quietly restored. It wasn't just about the erasure of her service, it was the message that someone thought it didn't matter. But it did matter. Thanks to the public outcry, Bea's full story, Marine, actress, activist, was back where it belonged. Just like that, Bea Arthur's legacy lived on, in the hearts of those who knew her, those she helped, and those who admired her strength.